In December 2017, a military contractor named Sarah Chen was analyzing satellite imagery for a routine geological survey when she noticed something that made her freeze at her computer screen. Deep in the Colorado Rockies, buried beneath what appeared to be an innocuous mountain peak, the thermal imaging revealed a massive heat signature, a geometric pattern of warm areas that formed what looked unmistakably like underground facilities. But according to every official map, geological survey, and government database she had access to, nothing was supposed to be there. Sarah tried to cross-reference the coordinates with military installations, mining operations, and research facilities. She found nothing. The mountain didn't appear on any list of active sites. There were no roads leading to it, no infrastructure visible from above, and no official acknowledgement that anything had ever been built there. Yet the thermal signature suggested something enormous was operating beneath that mountain, something that generated enough heat to be visible from space, something that had clearly been designed to remain hidden. What Sarah had discovered was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The Colorado Rockies, with their remote peaks and endless wilderness, have become a repository for some of America's most classified projects, hidden facilities, and deliberate secrets. From underground bunkers that officially don't exist to research stations conducting experiments the public isn't supposed to know about, Colorado's mountains hide a shadow infrastructure that operates parallel to the state millions of tourists think they know. You're watching Undiscovered America, where we explore overlooked corners of the country that most maps and travel guides won't show you. Today, we'll venture into the classified Colorado that exists beneath the familiar landscape of ski resorts and national parks, where the question isn't just what's hidden in these mountains, but why someone has gone to such extraordinary lengths to keep it secret. We'll explore facilities that appear on no official maps, installations that generate their own power and operate independently of any publicly acknowledged infrastructure, and locations where the very landscape has been modified to conceal activities that the government doesn't want you to know about. But before we begin, a word of caution. Many of these locations are on restricted federal land, protected by military security, and potentially dangerous. This isn't an invitation to go searching for these places. It's an exploration of how the familiar can hide the extraordinary, and how some of America's biggest secrets might be hiding in plain sight. Number 6. The deep underground military base at Cheyenne Mountain is officially NORAD's Combat Operations Center, but declassified documents suggest the facility extends far deeper and serves far more purposes than the public has ever been told. Most people know about Cheyenne Mountain as the home of NORAD, the underground bunker that monitors North American airspace and would coordinate responses to nuclear attacks. The official story is that it's a relatively straightforward military command center built inside a mountain for protection from nuclear weapons. But former contractors and military personnel have described a facility that bears little resemblance to the official descriptions. According to these accounts, the publicly acknowledged NORAD facility is only the uppermost level of a complex that extends hundreds of feet deeper into the mountain. Geological surveys from the 1960s show that massive amounts of rock were excavated from Cheyenne Mountain, far more than would be necessary for the facility that was officially described. Construction crews worked in shifts around the clock for nearly a decade, using specialized boring equipment that was brought in under military security and removed when the project was completed. But here's what makes the Cheyenne Mountain facility particularly intriguing. Power consumption data obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests shows that the mountain draws far more electricity than would be needed for a command center. The facility has its own power plant, its own water supply, and communication systems that operate independently of any civilian infrastructure. Former employees describe elevator systems that descend far below the levels that appear on any official blueprints, laboratories conducting research that has nothing to do with aerospace defense, and storage areas containing materials that don't appear in any military inventory. The official response to questions about the deeper levels of Cheyenne Mountain is always the same. National security considerations prevent disclosure of certain details about the facility. But the evidence suggests that what's hidden beneath that mountain might be far more extensive than what's been revealed. Number 5. The Phantom Research Station at Mount Evans appears on satellite imagery and shows signs of active operation, but according to every government agency, it doesn't exist. Mount Evans, one of Colorado's most prominent 14ers, is officially managed by the U.S. Forest Service as part of the Arapaho National Forest. The mountain is popular with hikers and climbers, and the area is supposed to be pristine wilderness with minimal human infrastructure. But high-resolution satellite imagery tells a different story. Near the summit of Mount Evans, in an area that should contain nothing but rocks and alpine vegetation, there are structures that clearly aren't natural. These appear to be prefabricated buildings, communication arrays, and what looks like a helicopter landing pad. What makes this particularly mysterious is that there's no official acknowledgement of any research station, weather monitoring facility, or military installation on Mount Evans. The Forest Service maintains that the mountain contains no permanent structures above the tree line. The National Weather Service has no facilities there. The military claims no operations in the area, yet the satellite evidence is unmistakable. The structures have been there for at least 15 years based on archived imagery. They appear to be maintained and periodically expanded. There are clear signs of regular vehicle traffic to and from the site, despite the lack of any official road. Local climbers occasionally report seeing helicopters landing near the summit, but these aircraft bear no military markings and don't appear to belong to any civilian agencies. The few hikers who've gotten close to the structures describe buildings that look more like a high-tech research facility than anything you'd expect to find on a remote mountain peak. The most unsettling aspect of the Mount Evans mystery is the response when people ask questions about it. Inquiries to federal agencies are met with denial that anything exists there. Local law enforcement claims no knowledge of the facility. Even satellite mapping companies seem reluctant to discuss what their own imagery clearly shows. Number 4, the underground bunker network beneath Denver International Airport extends far beyond what was officially constructed, creating a subterranean complex that may serve purposes having nothing to do with commercial aviation. Denver International Airport has been the subject of conspiracy theories since it opened in 1995, but many of these theories are based on speculation rather than evidence. However, there are some facts about DIA's underground construction that raise legitimate questions about what was really built beneath the airport. During construction, workers excavated far more underground space than would be necessary for baggage handling and utilities. Multiple contractors reported being hired to build underground facilities, then being dismissed before the projects were completed and replaced by different crews. Many of these contractors were required to sign unusually restrictive non-disclosure agreements. The official explanation is that construction mistakes required extensive rebuilding of underground systems, leading to the creation of unused tunnels and chambers that were eventually sealed off. But former airport employees describe underground areas that remain active and are restricted to personnel with special clearances. What's particularly intriguing is that DIA draws an enormous amount of electrical power, far more than comparable airports. The facility has redundant power systems, independent communication networks, and infrastructure that suggests it was designed to operate autonomously for extended periods. Thermal imaging of the airport grounds shows heat signatures in areas where no above-ground facilities exist, suggesting active underground operations. Construction workers who've done recent renovation work describe elevator systems that descend to levels not shown on any official blueprints. The most compelling evidence comes from geological surveys conducted during the airport's construction. These show that vast amounts of rock and soil were excavated and transported away from the site, quantities that far exceed what would be necessary for the underground facilities that were officially built. Number 3. The secret military testing range in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains operates without appearing on any official maps, conducting experiments that generate electromagnetic signatures visible from orbit. The Sangre de Cristo Range, which forms Colorado's southern border with New Mexico, contains some of the most remote and inaccessible terrain in the United States. Much of this area is designated as wilderness, with human access limited to hiking trails and primitive camping. But electromagnetic monitoring equipment has detected regular, high-intensity signals coming from deep within this supposedly pristine wilderness area. These signals have the characteristics of directed energy weapons testing, advanced radar systems, or other high-powered military technologies. What makes this particularly mysterious is that there are no official military installations in the Sangre de Cristo Range. The Department of Defense maintains no testing facilities there. The area isn't designated as restricted airspace. According to every official source, nothing military should be happening in these mountains. Yet the electromagnetic signatures are unmistakable and consistent. They occur on regular schedules, suggesting organized testing operations rather than natural phenomena. The signals are powerful enough to interfere with civilian radio communications over a wide area, leading to complaints from local residents about unexplained radio blackouts. Satellite imagery of the Sangre de Cristo Range shows anomalies that suggest the presence of large underground facilities. There are areas where vegetation patterns have been altered in ways that suggest subsurface construction. Thermal imaging reveals heat signatures that indicate active industrial operations in locations where no such operations are supposed to exist. Local ranchers and hikers occasionally report strange lights and sounds coming from remote valleys in the Sangre de Cristo Range. These reports describe phenomena that don't match any known aircraft or conventional military equipment. Lights that move in impossible patterns, sounds that suggest massive machinery operating underground, and electromagnetic effects that interfere with electronic equipment. Number 2. The classified research facility at Pikes Peak masquerades as a weather monitoring station, but appears to be conducting experiments that require isolation from all electromagnetic interference. Pikes Peak, one of Colorado's most famous mountains, is home to what's officially described as a high-altitude research station operated by the University of Colorado. The facility is supposed to study atmospheric conditions, weather patterns, and the effects of altitude on various phenomena. But the infrastructure at Pikes Peak suggests research that goes far beyond atmospheric science. The facility has power generation capabilities that far exceed what would be needed for weather monitoring. It has communication systems that operate on frequencies typically reserved for military applications. And it's surrounded by electromagnetic shielding that would be unnecessary for meteorological research. What's particularly intriguing is that the Pikes Peak facility operates under unusual security protocols for an academic research station. Access is restricted to personnel with federal security clearances. The research conducted there is classified, despite being nominally managed by a public university. And the facility's activities are exempt from the environmental monitoring requirements that apply to other high-altitude research stations. Former employees describe experiments that have nothing to do with weather or atmospheric science. These accounts mention research into electromagnetic phenomena, testing of advanced communication technologies, and experiments that require complete isolation from all external electronic interference. The location of the facility supports the theory that it's conducting research requiring electromagnetic isolation. Pikes Peak's elevation and remote location make it one of the few places in the continental United States where such research could be conducted without interference from civilian radio signals, cell phone towers, or other electronic infrastructure. Geological surveys show that the facility extends underground, with excavated areas that aren't shown on any official blueprints. Power consumption data indicates operations that run continuously, suggesting research activities that don't depend on weather conditions or other natural phenomena. Number 1. The underground city. Beneath the Rocky Mountain Arsenal is officially a wildlife refuge, but subsurface evidence suggests it's concealing one of America's largest classified installations. The Rocky Mountain Arsenal, located just outside Denver, has one of the most complicated histories of any site in Colorado. Originally built as a chemical weapons manufacturing facility during World War II, it was later used for nerve agent production during the Cold War before being converted into a national wildlife refuge in the 1990s. The official story is that the facility was decontaminated and converted into a nature preserve, with the underground areas sealed off to prevent environmental contamination. But evidence suggests that the conversion was more complicated than the public was told. During the original construction of the arsenal, workers excavated enormous underground facilities, far larger than would be necessary for chemical weapons production. These included multi-level bunkers, underground transportation networks, and storage areas capable of housing massive amounts of equipment and supplies. What makes the arsenal particularly intriguing is what happened during the supposed decontamination process. Instead of simply sealing off the underground areas, contractors spent nearly a decade conducting what they described as environmental remediation. But the amount of construction activity, the specialized equipment brought in, and the security measures implemented suggest that this was more than simple cleanup. Today, the Rocky Mountain Arsenal Wildlife Refuge draws enormous amounts of electrical power, far more than would be needed for a nature preserve. Seismic monitoring equipment detects regular underground activity that's inconsistent with natural geological processes, and thermal imaging shows heat signatures that suggest active operations beneath the surface. The most compelling evidence comes from the facility's electromagnetic signature. The arsenal generates radio signals that are inconsistent with wildlife management operations, but consistent with high-level government communication systems. The site has communication capabilities that would allow it to operate independently of civilian infrastructure, suggesting it's designed to function during national emergencies. Access to certain areas of the arsenal is restricted, even though it's officially a public wildlife refuge. Security measures include electronic surveillance systems, restricted airspace, and protocols that are more consistent with an active military installation than a nature preserve. Former employees of the decontamination process describe underground areas that were renovated rather than sealed, elevator systems that were upgraded rather than removed, and infrastructure that was expanded rather than eliminated. So what do these 6 hidden facilities tell us about Colorado and about the things that might be concealed beneath America's most familiar landscapes? First, there's the realization that much of what we think we know about federal land use might be incomplete or deliberately misleading. These facilities exist in areas that are officially designated for other purposes: national forests, wildlife refuges, research stations, suggesting that dual-use infrastructure is more common than the public realizes. Second, there's the question of what these facilities are actually doing. The electromagnetic signatures, power consumption, and construction evidence all point to operations that require enormous resources and absolute secrecy. The activities being conducted at these sites clearly go beyond what's acknowledged in any public documents. Third, there's the sophisticated level of concealment involved. These aren't hastily hidden installations, they're facilities that have been carefully integrated into existing infrastructure and disguised as legitimate operation. The level of planning and resources required suggests that concealing these operations is considered a high priority. But perhaps most importantly, these hidden facilities remind us that the landscape we think we know might be hiding things we never imagined. Colorado's mountains contain more than ski resorts and hiking trails. They contain a shadow infrastructure that operates parallel to the civilian world, conducting activities that require both absolute secrecy and enormous resources. The electromagnetic signatures detected from orbit, the heat signatures visible in thermal imaging, and the construction evidence documented by contractors all point to the same conclusion. Something significant is hidden beneath Colorado's mountain, something that requires the kind of security and concealment typically associated with the most classified government operations. These facilities exist not because Colorado is uniquely secretive, but because the state's geography provides ideal conditions for hiding large-scale operations. The remote peaks, the vast wilderness areas, and the sparse population create opportunities for concealment that don't exist in more densely populated regions. As you drive through Colorado, whether you're heading to the slopes, exploring the national parks, or just passing through on your way somewhere else, remember that the landscape around you might be hiding more than you realize. Beneath those familiar mountains could be facilities conducting research, housing equipment, or serving purposes that the public will never know about. These 6 secrets represent just what we can detect from the outside: electromagnetic signatures, construction evidence, and inconsistencies in official records. The real question isn't just what's hidden in Colorado's mountains, but what else might be concealed beneath landscapes that seem completely ordinary, in places where no one would think to look. Because sometimes the biggest secrets are hidden not in remote, exotic locations, but in the mountains you can see from the interstate, beneath the peaks that appear on every postcard, in the wilderness areas that millions of people think they know but have never really seen.